Is buying gold a mistake? Well, I started buying gold in 2008. It was kind of an emergency fund for me. It seemed like something stable, but I didn't have any firsthand experience with it. And really, I didn't know anyone who did. So for me, it wasn't something that I was particularly comfortable with at first. I started with some old European gold, and then I did work up to two 1 ounce coins. And by the time the 2011 run on spot price came around, I had a little bit of gold, not a lot. I'm sure I've mentioned all this before, but because I didn't really know what I was doing, I sat out of the 2011 to 2013 run on metals prices. I'd been buying quite a bit of silver leading up to 2011 as well, but there was a point where it just felt like the price was running away, and I wasn't comfortable buying into that spike. I just felt like I was too late. And if you look back at the charts, you'll see exactly what I was talking about. But at the time, I just had a sense that the same coin cost considerably more every time I went in to pick it up. In the summer of 2013, I started up again, and that's when I started that scheduled purchase fractional gold every month. And over the next 6 or 7 years, nothing really changed. The whole thing was a little bit boring, actually. It was just something that I had on autopilot. So I was making one-off purchases as well, but I was not buying out of excitement for the next price run. I just looked at it like it was an asset that survived the real estate crash and maybe something that could survive other crashes as well. And then if nothing else, it was just a savings account that wouldn't get liquidated for mundane stuff. I did sell some of that gold down. I sold it down twice to help fund some real estate deals, but I kept pretty consistent with my buying. Again, it was just something that I did in the background. Now that changed a little bit in 2020. In February of that year, I felt like all of that was about to change. We weren't at lockdown level yet, but the news was beginning to focus on the virus. And that's when I uploaded my first video to this channel. I didn't have any real expectation, any real agenda. I just thought that if I could give a quick pointer or two on what to buy, if you were like me in 2008 and didn't really have any experience coming in, then maybe I could save somebody an expensive mistake. Okay, so the reason that I'm giving my timeline here is just to put some color on ups and downs in spot price that I experienced in those 13 years. So I went from being nervous to buy gold in the first place to then thinking that I should have bought more, that I missed the boat on it when the price spiked in 2011. And then after that, I saw the price drop back down in 2013 and then pretty much trade sideways for, 6 or 7 years. In 2020, the prices took off again, and now we are trading relatively sideways again. So price went up, down, and sideways. And I think that that's all the directions that a two-dimensional price chart can go. So I've been accumulating it one way or another in all three directions. I've also been working and investing in other asset categories all along the way as well. So I think I have what would be considered a pretty realistic view of gold. There are, of course, lots of people who've been at it a lot longer than I have been, but 13 years is a fair amount of time with it. So all of that lead-in was to get to the topic of whether or not I think it's a mistake to buy gold. And the question actually comes up quite a bit. I don't know why people would pose that at me. I have a channel about gold. You know how I'm going to answer, but people will send me links. You'll see a lot of articles from financial gurus like Dave Ramsey or investors like Warren Buffett, and they have given a certain take on the topic. And I'm not qualified to debate either one of them, but I can say that my personal experience buying this stuff has never felt like a mistake. I mentioned that when I first started, I was nervous buying gold. It just felt really expensive. And then with silver, that was a little bit of a different story. I did feel like I made a mistake there for a long time, but my average cost was just too high. And I held the bag for about a decade before selling in late 2020, early 2021. And I did get out of silver just fine. And I think that the key to not being nervous about any of it in the first place is just knowing that you only realize a gain or a loss when you sell. And I bought both of the metals trending up, down, and sideways, and I also sold both metals at all three levels as well. Any losses that I incurred came because I didn't have much choice on timing those sales. It just happened to be the least of the available evils at the time. So selling gold in 2014 timeframe would have been terrible timing unless the alternative was to sell a better performing asset. And that is a situation that came up for me. So for me, realizing a loss hasn't even felt like a mistake. So that's all the boring side of gold, the just enough to not be considered a mistake side of gold. And there is a significant upside though as well. Regardless of what Dave Ramsey or even Warren Buffett have to say about any one asset class, you build wealth through consistency, through persistence. And the way that I've bought over the years is mostly in small bites, choosing to buy gold rather than something that I didn't need at the time. So I didn't steal capital that I would have otherwise invested. I stole capital that I would have wasted. So in that regard, I've built up gold with otherwise burned capital, so something from nothing. And then in the blue sky view of the whole thing, I could very easily sell what I have on a high. I could wait for the next spike in price and then sell what I've accumulated. I could also fish for offers on the collectible stuff that I have and then profit all the way around. And in that view, it's not a mistake really in any interpretation of the question. And then the other way to look at this whole thing is that the best possible scenario for gold is actually a scenario that I never want to see happen. There are certain conditions where every risky asset fails, where the local currencies fail, and gold shoots the moon. Kind of its final evolution. And even if you're not buying gold, expecting it to hit that final price explosion, it's still a possible benefit of having it. And that sleeper value always needs to be factored in some way. I mostly talk about it as a fallback for personal emergencies, but beyond the risk of personal investments failing, you still have the government wild card. And I'm not going to take this down a political lane, but our entire society operates on deficit spending. Governments around the world are using deficit spending to push us out of a hole, and that just is not a long-term strategy. So every time I read about plans to cancel school debt, or I see a picture of protesters with their cancel rent signs, I think I need a larger position in some kind of asset that isn't directly pegged to government spending, or just in general not pegged to other people's bad decisions, which is basically how I view gold, a hedge against other people's mistakes. So sure, if you buy gold on highs and you sell it on lows and you cannibalize capital that could have been better used along the way, then buying gold will be a mistake. So don't do that. Just get a plan for consistency and patience and you'll come out ahead. So let's call it good there. Hopefully that takes care of the question, but let us know what you think. Is buying gold a mistake? Let us know in the comments. And while you're there, be sure to hit the like button if you found any of this interesting. Also, make sure you're subscribed if you want more on the topic of gold and silver. And if you're still here, thank you again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.